On today's show, we are talking about the beginning and the purpose of the show, the offensive output of the Tigers this weekend, and there's been a lot of recent movement out of the transfer portal for MSU football, so let's get to it.
And there's the snap. Blitz comes. Mayfield back. Loads. Throws. Picked up by the Lions. Intercepted by the Lions. Intercepted by the Lions. Derek Barnes. Derek Barnes. Derek Barnes. Reggie Miller. And it's blocked again. What a block.
Lead pass in for Larkin. In space for Raymond. And he scores! Lucas Raymond!
Welcome to Detroit Sports Talk. I am your host, Bobby Buckets, and I want to thank you for taking the time to talk some Detroit sports today. So be sure to like today's show, subscribe to the channel, and please comment any of your thoughts on today's topics. Or feel free to reach out to me on Twitter at Bobby Buckets. That is Bobby Buckets with a 0 and a 3 for the O and the E. So let's go ahead. Jump right into the first topic, and it's all about the creation of the show. So, been a big fan of podcasts for the last who knows how long. But recently I've been really getting into some YouTube shows. And so Matt Sheehan of Locked On Spartans, Ku Khalil of Locked On Pistons. And there are also some other people who have kind of been making their own shows, like Justin Thin in the Spartan Dog for Life show, Jack Kelly with his Pistons Intellect show. And so as I've been, kind of watching more and more of these, I've just kind of wanted to get into something myself just to really discuss all things Detroit sports, Michigan sports, really. And so it's just kind of been something I've been itching at and just wanting to dive into. And so in terms of content purposes, I feel most knowledgeable with the Lions and the Pistons, less so with the Tigers and the Red Wings. But I'm kind of using this show, I'd say, as a way to incentivize me, to really buckle down and start paying attention to all four sports, Michigan State sports. So really more than the main four. I think what's a big thing for me is kind of getting into those advanced metrics. So, you've got stuff like true shooting percentage for NBA, getting into those kind of more detailed statistics. From an NFL standpoint, Warren Sharp is a really interesting follow on Twitter that I like. So I've seen some stuff there. But MLB, as I've just kind of been following more people in the MLB space on Twitter, there are a bunch of advanced stats that I didn't even know existed. So I'm interested in getting into those. And NHL stats, I'm not even sure what advanced stats the NHL has. So most of all, I just want to use the statistics in these videos. And I think it's just going to help me become more knowledgeable in all of these. So eventually, I'd love to watch some highlights on here, do some film breakdown, specifically, getting into like plays that the Lions are running, or, things that maybe after a timeout in a Pistons game, we get to break down that play. And most of all, I think it's just making me more knowledgeable in different areas of these sports. I really just want to grow my knowledge in all these areas. And I just feel like this show is the best way to, incentivize me to do that. So, I've really just been having a lot of fun working on this, getting back into editing, getting back into, I'm dusting off the rust from middle school with editing purpose, but this has always been really fun. I'm on Twitter now and I'm like liking tweets where I'm like, ooh, I could break this down in the show, or I could use this in the show. So most of all, I'm just really trying to dive deep on Detroit sports, and I want to get more involved in the statistics side of things and bring some analysis to the show. So ultimately that is my goal. It'd be nice to do a mailbag. I've got an email or a Gmail set up for the show. So maybe, a mailbag segment, or even, just responses that I may get on Twitter. So really, if you've got any ideas for the show, leave a comment below. Let me know on Twitter or email, anything that you would want to see. let's go ahead and get to the next topic. So the first topic officially of Detroit Sports Talk, we are going to jump right into a topic that I'm not super knowledgeable about, and that is the Detroit Tigers. So my only way of trying to make sense of this is to dive deep into the numbers immediately and to start making sense of things. So this past weekend, the Tigers went 2-1. They scored 13 runs on Friday. They scored 8 runs on Saturday and 4 runs on Sunday. So they are dead 500, sitting at 23-23 currently. So in order to start making sense of like what is the Tigers' offensive output so far this season, I went and averaged all of their runs. And so right now they average just a little bit over 4 runs per game. They're sitting at 4.2 runs per game. And so I wanted to know how frequently have they scored 4 or more runs, and that's been in 28 of the 46 games so far this season. So that's roughly 61%. So just over half of their games so far, they are scoring more than 4 runs. Now, they scored 8 runs on Saturday, so I was curious. How many times have the Tigers scored 8 or more runs? Not great. Now, granted, 8's a lot for a baseball game, but they have scored 8 or more runs in 6 out of 46 games this season, so that's good for 13% of their games. And then I was curious, 13 is a ton of runs for a ball game. So, what's the max that they've scored all season? 13. It's the first time they've actually scored over 11 runs all season. So this was about as good of an offensive output the Tigers have put together in any weekend, really, all season. And so looking at that, I was trying to come up with a reasoning as to, why this weekend, what has happened that's different from the rest of the season so far as to why this happened to be their best offensive output. And so Torque, first of all, he's hit 3 home runs in the last 7 games. So it's nice to see his bat come around. And then Javi as well had himself a weekend. So I was curious. I've seen it on Twitter that, I saw the report that AJ Hinch said, Javi's going to start. No matter what, Javi is going to start. And so I was curious prior to this weekend, what did his stats look like? So prior to May 16th, so that was Thursday, Friday, they didn't have a game. I think it was Thursday, and then Friday they played. So prior to Thursday, he was batting 167. He had 1 homer and 13 RBIs on the season. So that was in something like 35, 37 games. And this weekend alone, he had 8 hits and 13 at-bats. So he batted .615 this weekend, and he also had 7 RBIs. So more than half of his RBIs came from this weekend. And I think his batting average, jumped up to above 200. And I say jumped up, not like it's a huge jump, but Javi obviously had a huge weekend. And you've been missing that all season. So that's obviously contributing to some more increased runs. Torque's bat is coming around, but most of all, it was my first time taking a look at really their entire roster and just seeing, where's everybody at basically from a batting standpoint. You've got 1 person batting over 300 and you've got 3 batting over 250. So really the bats they're struggling. They're struggling to hit right now. You're not generating any offense when you've got 1 person hitting over 300. And I think it was 301 specifically. So obviously the bats got to get going. It was a good start this weekend after following it up after 2019 scoreless innings straight prior to that. So they've got they're kicking off the week with 3 games. So this is Monday, May 20th. They kick off their 3 games with the Royals today. And the Royals are in second place in AL Central right now. So the Tigers are currently 5 games behind the Royals, and they're 6.5 games behind the Guardians, first place Guardians in the AL Central. So these are some big games. They gotta keep up with the offense, and hopefully maybe you can steal 2. Maybe you can steal 2 out of the 3 that you take and work your way back up in the AL Central. So let me know what you guys think. What do you think is the biggest issue right now offensively for the Tigers? Is it just bats? Is it simple as that? Nobody's hitting the ball? Comment down below in the YouTube comments, or let me know over on Twitter what you think. And lastly, our third topic, huge weekend for MSU football. From a transfer portal standpoint, we had some good drama on Twitter the past week, kicking up the MSU U of M rivalry. I mean, it's only going to get better when they play in October because of what happened this weekend. I got off of Twitter a couple years ago and got back on a couple months ago. And man, this weekend alone is a reason to have a Twitter account between, kind of the rivalry dealing with MSU and U of M, the whole Scotty Scheffler ordeal this weekend, just some top tier memes coming out of that whole Scotty Scheffler situation. So let's talk about these transfers though. So why was this such a huge deal for, the Michigan State rivalry? Well, first off, who's out? Who did Michigan State lose? And that was defensive back Jaden Mangum, who transferred to the University of Michigan. So yes, a Michigan State football player decided to transfer to the defending champions, the University of Michigan. And so that sparked up a whole lot of conversation on Twitter between some past Spartan dogs. And I forget who it was specifically. It might have been Brian Lewerke, who said even during their times when they were struggling, it never, ever jumped into his mind that he would have transferred to U of M. So just a lot of, Spartan Dog alumni chipping in about how they would not have done that. So that is why it's going to contribute to the rivalry. But let's talk about who transferred into MSU. So number one on Wednesday, I want to say that was Wednesday, what was it, the 15th, we got a transfer from Oregon, defensive tackle Ben Roberts. He is a former 4-star. He's got 3 years of eligibility left, coming from the West Side. So recently learned of a guy on MSU staff going by the name of Coach Meat. I do not know much about Coach Meat, but came from the West Side, came from Oregon, has already made huge differences in recruiting. So he's making a big impact there. And so Ben Roberts is following him from the West Side of the country to the Mitten State. Former 4-star, 3 years of eligibility left. Most of all, what I'm seeing with all these transfers is they're just building depth. Frankly, I couldn't tell you who's on the team. I couldn't tell you what the depth chart is going to look like. I need NCAA 25 to come out, and I need to start a dynasty with Michigan State to start learning who's on the team, because they have been so active in the transfer portal that honestly, I don't know who's starting. It's just been such a turnaround that really I'm excited for them to start playing, start learning, where our strengths are, where our weaknesses are. Most of all, though, they're just getting talent, figure out where those players fit. Let them battle it out. Let them have competition over this school year. Figure out where your weaknesses are at, and then you recruit from there, and you complement your weaknesses. So we also had 3 transfers commit on Friday. 2 defensive backs, one in Nakai Martinez, who is transferring from UCF. So he is a sophomore. He started every game at safety or maybe corner. He's a defensive back, probably will play safety for Michigan State, but started every game as a sophomore and led UCF in interceptions. Also in the defensive back room is cornerback Jeremiah Hughes, who is transferring from LSU. He played as a true freshman. He played mostly on special teams as opposed to playing defensive possessions. He did play some, but played predominantly special teams. But again, another young guy who's going to have at least 3 years of eligibility left. And then just to add to the rivalry, the Michigan and Michigan State rivalry, linebacker Samaj Bridgman transferring from Michigan to Michigan State. So essentially doing a little in-state trade in the transfer portal. Samaj at linebacker, he's another former 4-star who's going to have 4 years of eligibility left. So just a huge weekend of transfer news for Michigan State. Very active in the portal they've been. Jonathan Smith continuing to add talent to this team. What does this team look like? I don't have a clue. I don't have a clue. Vegas thinks it's 4.5. So Michigan State's total wins are sitting at 4.5. Last I look, are you guys taking the over or are you taking the under? Let me know in the comments below or over on Twitter. At this point, 5 wins. Can they go 5-7, 5-8? I think so. Get a bowl game? I don't know. Let me know in the comments below. Let me know over on Twitter. And that's it. We did it. First episode of Detroit Sports Talk is over. I want to thank you guys for taking the time to talk some Detroit sports today. Be sure to like today's show, subscribe to the channel, and comment below to share your thoughts on today's topics. Also, be sure to follow me on Twitter at Bobby Buckets. That is Bobby Buckets with a 0 and a 3 for the O and the E. Thanks again for taking the time to tune in, and I will see you guys on the next episode. Peace.